This founder believes robotics is going to be mainstream and as big as the smartphone market much sooner than people think because of gaming. Make some noise for Michael, Isakov, and RoboDuel. This founder believes video games will be the primary tool used in education and recruiting within the next 15 to 20 years. Give it up for Aaron, Fletcher, and Repeat. Let's kick it over to our head referee, Nick.
Welcome, everybody. We are in the Elite Eight for the Sports Startup Digital Debate Competition, and now we're in the Esports and Gaming round to find who is the best esports and gaming companies. So we have two amazing founders. Let's get ready to debate. To start things off, we're going to flip it off with a coin toss. All right, so Aaron, would you like heads or tails?
I'll go with heads.
It is tails. So, Michael, would you like to receive the question or would you like to defer?
I'd like to defer.
Defer. Aaron, so you're going to be the first one to answer the response. You'll have 45 seconds to answer uninterrupted. Michael, you'll have 45 seconds to answer uninterrupted, and then you guys can go back and forth. So if we could set up a 10-minute shot clock, that would be great. Good luck, founders. And here's the first question. Which aspect of diversity do you feel is most responsible for increasing company performance?
So diversity is an interesting question because there's a lot of different types of diversity, and I think to answer the question kind of directly, the diversity that I think that helps productivity is socioeconomic diversity. So if you've got someone there that has that comes from a poorer background or comes from a background like that, they're generally going to be much hungrier than someone there that's coming from a background that has been coddled their life, that has lots of money. They're not driven, they don't have these goals as much for that economic, basically being able to gain money, go up the ladder, those sort of things. And you see it a lot throughout history there with when someone there is very rich and very affluent and their kids, they never do as good as their parents, and it kind of steps down. There are other cases where that does happen, but it's normally not a normal one. There are other diversities there, like obviously diversifying by gender, diversifying by all of these other ones, and I think they definitely help, but they're more for building a product. They give you different opinions, they give you different ways to do things, and I think they're very valuable if you're purely going for how do you make this push into this market. Also, cultural diversification is another one that I think is valuable, because if you're four white guys trying to go target the Indian market, you're probably not going to do very well because you don't know how to culturally fit your product for that market. So I think that does help. So it really just depends, but in terms of for productivity, I think socioeconomic is probably the big one there.
Yeah, so I'd have to disagree with that. From my experiences, the diversity that you really look for to build and optimize the performance of the company is really a diversity of skill sets. So when you're building a company, it's very important that you have unification amongst the entire team and the entire organization. There's a sole vision, there's a sole plan that everyone has to focus on relentlessly. And the culture has to have certain constraints. Even if you look at some of the most inclusive companies in the world, they have limits and barriers on the type of people they accept into their companies, like Facebook and Google. So you kind of have to set those boundaries and kind of converge into the company being really, really good at doing one thing. So one of the most important things in like incorporating diversity into the company is, sure, you want a diversity of ideas within the creative space, but in terms of the space of where the company is going, you want to have unification there. So you want to hire people with a diversity of backgrounds and a diversity of skill sets. If you look at some of the top performing teams and organizations in the world, like NASA or Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, you'll see that these organizations, they're like ant colonies. Everybody has a specific role, but obviously they're way more creative, they have way more freedom, but they have this diversity of skill sets, this international diversity as well. And that's kind of what we try to incorporate at RoboDuels. We have an international diverse team of people with various skill sets. So, it's kind of like the Apple model where you have people with certain skills focus solely on one aspect of the product. And through that diversity, you kind of add to this whole vision that you're all striving towards. So if I were to say what is the most important part of diversity, it's really backgrounds and skill sets. That's what builds great teams, great products, and great companies.
Look, I think skill sets is obviously definitely very important, but the skill sets, you should be hiring the person with the skill set for the job. That's a given. That shouldn't be something that you need to diversify. If you've got someone there that's an engineer and you need to diversify the skill set to hire someone there that's a caterer, you've screwed up somewhere. Like, that's already a screw up. You need diversification in terms of skill sets is not something you diversify. You focus. There's a reason college degrees there are really focused. They have them in certain SKUs. You don't just do computer science, you do computer science in a certain field. There is a reason they're really skewed, and you hire people for that. I agree diversity culturally. Like, we have staff in Egypt, we have staff in Serbia, we have staff in Brazil, we have staff in Australia, staff in the US. And that cultural diversification, but the reason we've hired people in those countries is because they have an esports background. It's hard for us to find. They have a gaming background. Also seems to be very hard to find someone that is engineering that also plays video games. For whatever reason, there's a big disconnect there. And that's what we've tried to actually do, and we've had to do that, diversify those to get those skill sets correct. But I think if you want someone there in a sales team to boost that and boost that productivity and boost those sort of things, I think you need to find someone that's hungry. And you don't always find someone that's hungry that fits basically by diversifying their skill sets.
Even in that case, you're finding people with a certain model who fit a certain model. They do X and they also play esports. There are a lot of teams that fall apart because of systematic errors within an organization as it scales. And having like the best teams, you hire the best people, and you really want to focus on getting that specific SKU that you need the most. It's being competed over by a lot of different companies, and basically your hyper focus needs to be to acquire those people. So some of the best engineers, salespeople all around the world, they're distributed and they're highly competed after. So, and they're highly diverse as well within their,
And that's up to the founder. That's your job to sell them. So your job is to sell them on your vision, your company, what you're building. That's a repercussion of what's already happening. So your job is to purely go out there and find those best people, find those things, and actually do that. But I think from a
diverse team together that can attack the problem in hand. Sure, you can get any engineer off the street to build a website, but if you really want to stand out and have a market share that's significant and be relevant, you want to get the top engineers. And that's a crazy group of people. People at the top of their skill set, they are sometimes borderline insane, and you have to, it's like a big job to get them all in. But if you have that capability to build that dream team where you have the Jordan, where you have the Pippin, and you can bring them all together in the Rodman, you can basically build an A team that's going to dominate and take over and basically dominate like all the other competition, attack all the different markets that you want to attack, and really take your company to the next level.
Yeah, but you've also got to watch out, because if you're just going for the 18 people, you're gonna have a lot of issues. So if you're just going for the A team and everything like that, you have alpha issues within the company, you have all these things like that, and it all falls apart once everyone tries to direct the message. There's so many companies there where I've seen where we've got co-CEOs, and it becomes a problem.
You can't let that happen. That's why I said that you don't want this huge diversity of all of these different ideas because your customers are going to have ideas of how your company should do things. Your employees are going to have ideas, but you have to relentlessly attack the vision and define the vision constantly. That's what all Steve Jobs did, was define the vision, and seek out the best people. And he was one of the most successful founders and CEOs of the last 100 years. So he that is the model that I'm taking for my pitch about how diversity can just be performant. So I just looked at the most performant companies out there, and and the most performant organizations that actually change the world, and that's literally the formula that they want.
That's a nice formula to have if you're Apple, but being a startup, you can't follow that formula exactly. You need to figure out in terms of define the diamonds in the rough. That's what you're going for. You don't have 50 million to go find this person for $1 million. You need to find the diamonds in the rough, and to find someone that is productive, it comes from, for me, it looks like if you want to hire someone there that's been a barista since they were 12 or 14 or whatever it is, they've done stuff like that, but they have a degree in computer science. They're humbled. They're hungry. They want to do this, and it leads to big different things.
Like you're talking about somebody who's humble, who's poor, like who has that hunger, right? Who's like has the desire and the ambition to move forward. And I disagree that, you know, rich people, like I don't come from a great socioeconomic background by any means, but you know, there are people who are successful and at the top in their field and hungry, and they came from perfectly fine backgrounds. It's not like white or black like that. But yeah, you know, you're describing kind of a kind of a uniform in a sense. And what I'm saying is just like, you want the best people, and those people are diverse, and they bring a diverse set of skills to your company and value to your company, and they come from diverse backgrounds, and that's who you want to target if you want to really be successful.
But it's up to you to decide that, right? So I agree, it isn't black and white.
As an early stage startup, you're not even concerned about diversity. You're concerned about growth, about user acquisition, about getting investment. You're worried about a lot of different things as an early stage startup. So I think this question in particular is for companies that are like mid-range, maybe raise some seed money and are doing like a lot of hiring. But you know, at an early stage company, the conversation is completely different. Every single person, you know, there's 5 people on a team. Every person is 20% of the company in terms of output. So you know, that conversation is completely different because you know, like.
All right, gentlemen, this is a great recap. Let's move on to the next question. So, what do you do if you start gameplay testing during alpha and your customers are clearly not liking something you invested a third of your resources in? What do you do in that situation? And Michael, that would start with you.
Oh yeah, so if you invest 30% of your resources in something, right? Basically, you want to, and people don't like it, you have to stop doing it. And you have to cut your losses and start building what people are actually responding to and want, because your primary focus as the founder is to increase growth. So what can you do after the fact? You can take that that thing that you built. Hopefully, if it's something technical, you can kind of recycle it and use it later on in another component, or you can like kind of repurpose it. And you know, for example, when YouTube first started.
Michael, we're going to cut you there. We're going to let Aaron go with his 45 seconds now.
Yeah, look, I agree with certain things. If you built this and you've got 1/3 of your budget in it, and you've got to that point, you as a founder have already screwed up. You either need to pivot or you need to figure out what's going on there and talk to your user base. You should have already talked to them. I think one of the biggest things is it only costs you $1 to figure out whether you've got market fit. You draw some stuff on a piece of paper and go talk to them. But it is exactly that. What do you do after the fact? And I think after the fact, you really need to then talk to the audience. You need to figure out what were the actual problems, because sometimes those problems could be small and they can be fixable within what you have. And I think if you can salvage what you can, there's graphic assets, there's all these sort of things. If the gameplay needs to change, it's easy to do. If the business model needs to change a little bit, it's relatively easy to do, because you're still at 1/3 of the company. You probably haven't even cooked in half of that stuff. So I think it all comes down to conversations you have with your audience, your customers, with everything like that, and you pivot towards what they want. And then also, don't just stick to that one opinion of that 100 users that said that. Go talk to more. Go spend $500. Go spend $5 to every single person. We'll give you an Amazon voucher for a real opinion. We'll do this. We'll do that, and try to diversify that field of people you're talking to, because yes, they may not be your target audience. And if you're building Candy Crush and that audience you have there is like some 18-year-old guys, then you need to figure out and say, all right, it may actually be our product, it may actually fit for another market. But I think you don't want to waste too much time doing that. So those conversations need to happen very quickly.
Anything to add to that, Michael?
No, I mean, that's pretty much straightforward. You know, after the fact, there's not much really you can do other than pivot and learn from that and just change and make sure it doesn't happen again. So I'm pretty much on board with that.
Great. All right, so we'll move on to the third question here. The gaming community is known for being a vocal and territorial group. When they see something they don't like, they oftentimes band together to influence outcomes. Knowing that you'll have to engage a more mainstream audience to scale, how do you manage possibly alienating your core audience and entering sellout status?
Okay, so sellout status in gaming means one or two things. It's actually really just a business model. So there's a thing called pay to win, where the more money you put into the thing, the more you win. And then the other one is the free to play model. That's basically it's free to play friendly. So there's these two different models, and I think the way that sellout status really works is in gaming, it's not really a really thing. If you're an influencer, I think it is a thing because you're a person. But as a company, sellout status, all that means is that you're driving revenue upfront first and getting a pay-to-win game versus a free-to-play game that is more or less sellout status like League of Legends. You're instead driving this user base, and you're finding these points there to make money off that user base through skins, through things that don't affect the gameplay to hit you sellout status. So they're both very profitable. You've got companies like Machine Zone, Plarium, Comtoise, that companies people probably don't even know who they are, but they're earning billions of dollars, $2 to $3 billion a year, doing this sellout model, this pay-to-win model. And what they do is they reskin the game, and they have massive power.
We'll cut you off right there, Michael. You got your 45 seconds.
Yeah. So I kind of this really applies to games that change over time, that have an audience and then lose their audience or try to gain a new audience. So the best examples, it really comes down to authenticity. And the example I'll give is Halo versus Counter-Strike. Halo decided that, they used to be one of the top esports in the world, and then they decided to add in basically copy paste from Call of Duty, and they hired a bunch of people who they had no skin in the game. They were just some consultants, and the game is like almost dead now. However, Counter-Strike has made no functional changes to their game. They remained authentic, even despite the whole ups and downs in mobile and VR, in PUBG, and all the innovations in FPS. They just kept the game the same. And it still has 1 million concurrent users. So it really comes down to remaining authentic, and you have to do that at all costs, and just take the waves as they come. Your game will grow if you continue to improve it, and stay true to what got you to the table in the first place.
Look, I think Halo is actually a horrible example to use, and the reason I say that is Halo, the reason it kind of failed is, well, not because the gameplay changed or any of those sort of things so much. It's actually because it's locked into one console too. So it's on Xbox. It was on Xbox only. Yes, that is changing now. And if you have a look at the downloads, the number one game on Steam was Halo. For when they released the Master Chief section, it was one of the top games. You've got Halo, the new one coming out. Xbox have actually done that better.
It has no players. It has less than 10,000 players. It is Counter-Strike is majority of people play Counter-Strike play on the PC. Yeah, they release some Xbox games, but that was not it's nowhere near the level. It's still
they do now, but it's because the game got abandoned to a degree. It's now just IP, and if you have a look at what's happening in the next 9 months, that's going to change. And this model changes for two different types of games.
That is staying true. They're not trying to add in power-ups or any other features. A huge the core audience of Halo just died after they tried to copy.
But they're also very different games. So Halo and Counter-Strike is a living game. It's a game that sits there and keeps going. They keep adding patches. They keep doing this. Halo is a year by year or every 3 years. And I think if Halo adopted the model that Call of Duty did, they would be much more successful. So I think if they actually adopted, they didn't do yearly releases. Did they bring out a new Halo every single year? And that's what fuels Call of Duty. That's the problem. And it's...
No, at the fundamental core, they stopped being the game. When you start a game, when you create a game, you're creating a piece of content, and you're hooking people on. That innovation, that idea, that spark, once it's lost, once it's bastardized, you're gonna lose your audience, and it's always a bad long-term decision.
They haven't lost it, because when the sales go up for Steam, they went up there and it was the number one sold game. They sold millions of copies of the new Halo. They came out, and
Halo's the best game ever. And do that, because I can guarantee you in 10 years, this new game Valorant that just came out, first-person shooter. I guarantee you in 10 years. Valorant will not be relevant. Counter-Strike will still be relevant.
I think League of Legends have the number one example of a game with staying power with League of Legends. They've been able to build that. They've built the content engine. The difference is you've got Fortnite there, and the reason those games are so sticky is because they've stuck true to their free-to-play model, and they built this content engine that changes every single week. You see Fortnite and the way they stay authentic and everything like that, they've hit 100% sellout status. They have Marvel dropping in the game. They've got all this crap happening in the game. That is this, but they're leveraging that in a positive way. They're like, hey guys, we're giving you this, which is amazing. So they found a way to be able to negate that by doing that. But it is effectively hitting it, and that's what I'm saying is you can't do both. So if you have a free-to-play model and a pay-to-win model, and people try to do both together, you lose. You're over. If you say and do your free-to-play model and you do it right, it will stay forever. The problem is Halo is a retail game, Counter-Strike is a free game. You have two different models you're trying to pit against each other, and I don't think it works. The reason the game's...
Counter-Strike is not a free game. The latest versions of Counter-Strike, it's also a retail game.
No, CSGO is free. So CSGO is free. So if you want to download it...
DLCs and all that other stuff that you buy on top of that.
If I want to play competitively in CSGO, I download it for free. It costs me nothing. I can sit there and I can play competitively. I can do everything I want. DLC is how they monetize that and how they keep the game alive, because they drive that content engine. So it's what they call a content wheel. And they're very different kind of...
I'll bring it back to, like, if you want your, like, whatever business model you use to build your game, the most important thing is remaining authentic to what got you to the table. And maintaining that core audience and building upon that foundation, not trying to go laterally. You have to continue vertically building upon it as the founders, as the creators would. Otherwise, you're just absolutely going to lose that audience, and you're going to enter into sellout status. You're going to have some short-term benefits, but in the end, it's never a good long-term strategy.
But you see that happening with the games on mobile. So they enter sellout status within 2 weeks, but they're earning billions of dollars every single year. So you take Machine Zone, who do Game of War and Mobile Strike. They're completely sellout games, but they built their business model to allow them to do that. So what they do is what they do to be able to do this, they leverage this curve. So within 2 weeks, your curve gets so high in power level that you have to basically pay to keep progressing. And they don't mind if you leave, because what they do is they create these new servers. Every single day, a new server is created with a new pool of people that join that are all fighting against this power band, where everyone thinks they're unique. They build a model that works around the sellout. You've got Plarium with Raid Shadow Legends do the same thing. NCSoft with Lineage. You've got Supercell, one of the biggest ones you'll probably actually know, which is Boom Beach, Clash Royale, and Clash of Clans, which are all sellout models. You take Hearthstone. Hearthstone is the same thing. It's based around, it's a pay-to-win game that is purely around, you have to buy the cards to...
But like looking back at the question, I mean, I actually agree with like a lot of those points that you say. My focus is a bit more on esports, but what I could say is that, if you look at the gaming community, typically those communities are tied to games. So you have Fortnite has a massive community. Now the community backlash is really, what's the concern? And all I'm saying is that, listen, if you try to be inauthentic, you have no skin in the game when you're making decisions about, from the business standpoint or the creative standpoint, you're gonna basically have problems with that audience. Yeah. And that audience is actually critical. So, within the context of that, you should never, ever try to enter into any sort of...
I think we're arguing the same thing, but it's more a matter of, you're saying stay true and authentic to not entering sellout ever. I'm saying if you're going to go sellout status, do it properly. And I'm saying if you want to go to the free-to-play status and not sell out, you need to do that properly. But they both work as a business effectively, but you can't try to do both. If you try to do both and you're like, hey, we can also remain authentic while being a sellout, I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. So you need to pick one, and as a business, they both work. But I think you've got to pick and choose one, and you drive that home all the way. There's a reason League of Legends still exists, CS:GO still exists. There's a reason these games still exist, and it's because their software they're a game as a service, and they build it on that. They're free to play, and they earn the money through skins that don't affect the gameplay. All they do is they make you look prettier, and then they leverage that through the competitive engine, where they're like, if some guy stomps my face and then he teabags me and he's wearing a Jester costume, I'm like, shit, I want to buy that. So the next time I teabag someone, I'm wearing a Jester costume. So they build a model that works for that, and I think that's how they've done it. And you got to keep that content flowing. Once you stop it,
I would say that that the fact that it's free is a big factor, but I think even a bigger factor is just fundamentally when the game was first released. If you look back into the 1990s, the game had no skins, but it still blew up. It had tremendous growth, and that growth was sparked by not any skins, not graphics. The graphics sucked, but it still was one of the top FPS games. It was successful because of the mechanics and because of the structure and the design of the game.
It was the first one there. That's why. It was the first one. That's the reason why.
Excuse me. That built the community. And that community made all of these business models and all this stuff possible. All these skins. The skins were imported from other games. Like it's not a very novel idea. But the most important thing when you're innovating in gaming is growth, and is securing some level of growth and then capitalizing off of that. And really that comes down to being true to what got you the growth in the first place. And if you try to like copy your competitors or be something that you weren't in the beginning, it's going to be very, very bad in the long term. And that's why Counter-Strike has remained successful for the past 20 years, period.
But it remained successful through evolutions, right? So Counter-Strike, you had 1.3, you had 1.5, and it evolved into a brand new game. And then it started dying off, and then Call of Duty started taking over. Like, I was a competitive, so I played professionally, I played Counter-Strike. And so I saw this. I stopped it when exactly the same thing happened. Sellout status happened when CSGO and 1.6 Source it rolled out to that. But then they did a very good job of pushing on that and not stopping. They bought in skins. They did all these sort of things that kept that content engine going, and that's what helped it. So it was dying, and World of Warcraft took over, which was a content engine. You saw all the other games kind of start taking it over. Dota actually killed CS 1.6. So Dota, when that came out, most of everyone that I played competitively with went to Dota, and that was the issue there. And I think they weren't remaining authentic. And yeah, I agree. They were remaining authentic, but the problem was that the game didn't have anything to keep you coming back. Yes, the gameplay was amazing, but they needed to evolve, and that's where they went to Source, and they evolved again. They updated the graphics. They did these amazing things with that, and then what they did is that user base started tumbling off. So they brought out CSGO. It's now free to play. It now has skins in it to keep you playing. It has objectives and these PvE goals and quests. It's completely changed from what it was then. And it went through these fails where it went like this, it failed, and it evolved and brought out a new game each time to be able to change that. But what they did to keep it alive is they focused on one thing, which is making it free to play and keeping that content engine going. But anyway.
Yeah, so at its core, it has remained Counter-Strike. The Counter-Strike that you play, the D-Dust map that you go on 20 years ago and today, it plays very, very similar. There were very few functional changes. A lot of the changes that were not at the core of the business, at the core of like the actual gameplay. It was more kind of peripheral add-on, auxiliary things that you could add later on.
The gameplay changed massively. So from 1.6, the hitboxes for your face went 60% bigger. Like, they changed it massively for a casual marker, which is why people hated it at the competitive scene. There's a reason.
No. They did not change like to the extreme that other sellout companies that I would say are sellouts have changed. So they kept they didn't make any severe changes. 60% change here, 10% change here, not a big deal. It's still Counter-Strike.
It killed the competitive scene. That's what happened with it. CS Source was not competitive. So the next evolution of it, and it wasn't until CSGO came out did it go back to being competitive.
It was very nominal difference relative to the entire landscape. That's why like they tried to go away from it, and then they went back because like the original Counter-Strike worked. Games, like the best games, can last forever. Just look at like chess, for example. I'm sure you could add like different skins and make like a whole gamified chess game. Probably wouldn't be popular now, but what I'm saying is like, essentially, if you have a good game, do not change it, remain authentic to it, and your community, even if it starts out small, will continue to grow as you develop, and there will always be ways to monetize it. We have all those models now, and that's not original. What's original about a community and about a game is the actual game itself. And you have to stay true to that if you want your game to.
But you can say that, and there's Arena of Valor is a game that they've remained authentic. So Arena of Valor were one of the biggest mobile games, and they've basically killed the game in the West.
So there are limits. Like there are some games that will never reach 1 billion users. One of the reasons that like Fortnite is so popular is the game type. That was one of the innovations, in PUBG as well. They have 100 people in a battle royale, 100 people at once. So their concurrent users are way higher than everyone's. Their capacity for users are way higher. And that's one of the innovations they made. Now, will there be an esports game that will cover 2.2 billion people and have them?
Yeah, but Fortnite's not an esports game. Fortnite, it is a horrible spectator.
100 million tournament.
It is not. I can hands down tell you. You talk to anyone that is competitive, they will tell you it is not a competitive game because it is not a spectator-ship friendly game. It is not going to blow up as an esports because you're playing a battle royale game.
The top YouTubers like. Just look at some of the top YouTubers.
Yeah, but that's not esports. That's not esports. That's content. They're two different things. So if you're talking about them watching them and stuff like that,
you're only. How many people saw the $100 million tournament for Fortnite?
And how many people watch League of Legends, which was a lot more than that? So you look at it from a spectator thing. Epic even said it failed.
It is an esport. Fortnite is an esport.
It is not going to work as an esport in its current version. Because the problem with it is, just hear me out in terms of how Battle Royale works. So the problem is you drop 100 people in. The reason Counter-Strike works so much better than it is because you drop 100 people in, and the first 5 minutes they're getting resources, they're doing crap like that, and it's not entertaining. And when kills start happening, you're not following a story as a user. Instead of just jumping from kill cam to kill cam, and it becomes a really big problem. Epic have said they're trying to fix the problem, and now they're not really pushing. They haven't had a tournament for 3 months. They haven't done anything for it because they're trying to figure out. They have Cash Cup. They have Cash Cup, but that's not an actual big thing. That's just their weekly leaderboard. It's not actually a tournament. No one actually plays against each other. They just jump on a leaderboard, and whoever gets the most kills in that time gets it. The reason Fortnite is so successful for everyone largely is the content. If I can have a Deadpool skin in the game, I would go play the game purely because it's got that. It's the content they're pulling out every single day. Literally, they bring out new content, and that's what's driving that user base growth.
I'm not saying esports is the sole way that they make money, but they are an esport. They have professional players. They have professional tournaments that are sponsored, that are like.
Yeah, but so does everything. There's lots of ones that are little games, that are big games.
No, not everything. Not everything has that. There are only like a select few top games. Like you can look at your website. You don't have every single game on there. You have the best games. So it's basically
But we're not targeting people for esports. We're targeting casual users. So we're not trying to do these large-scale tournaments. We want to bring in the 99% of casual users to start playing these games in the leaderboard styles. We're not trying to do tournaments directly.
Casual users have the money to start esports, like have to like light the match for esports. So if you can't just like launch an esport. You have to launch a game, and then people have to play the game. They have to enjoy it. You build a community. You stay authentic. You keep innovating. You keep improving. You keep adding auxiliary things that are going to bring people in. And then all of a sudden, now you have professional players. Now you have a meta game. Now
every professional player has been quitting. All of them for Fortnite. They've all moved over to COD because the game is not competitive. They've all moved over to other games that are out there.
That Fortnite is a good game or not. I'm just saying.
No, I'm not arguing that. I'm saying from an esports scene of thing, the esports scene went like this and went down, and the only reason they're doing it is they're staying for the esports scene at all. They're just showing up for the prize pool, and Epic is fueling that.
All right, gentlemen, this has been a very enthusiastic debate here, and it's going to be a difficult decision for the judges. So what we're going to do, very unique, is we're going to ask one more question. There's not going to be any response after that. You're each going to have 45 seconds to leave on the highest note possible there. So we're going to ask that question. You're each going to have 45 seconds to end on your message, no back and forth, and we'll make sure that the judges have ample information to make their decision. So here's the last question. How do you approach a situation where your users or customers start using your platform in unintended ways, but changing your platform would cause severe financial impact? What would you do to adapt to that? And Aaron, you'll start that question, and there's no rebuttal for you, Michael. You'll leave your statement.
Look, I think if it's going to... So you look at Uber. Uber is a model there that currently they're actually struggling in COVID. So right now people are ordering more, and they're actually not earning money because they don't earn money off that. And I think it comes down to, one, if you're struggling financially, but you think you can turn that over to actually making money, and you think you can grow that. Amazon is another example where they grew the market huge. They haven't earned revenue in 20 years. And if you can grow that user base, and that financial dip is still growing the user base, and you think you can pivot that, or you have ideas around how to monetize that later, I think it makes sense. And you raise money around that logic. They're backing the founder, they're backing your vision, they're backing your plan. But if it's hurting you financially and you can't ever turn it into money, don't do it. It sounds horrible. Turn it off, whatever it is. But I think it comes down to making sure that you can eventually monetize that, because if you're still growing the user base with that divot and that financial, repercussions, do it. If it makes sense for in the future, you have a way to monetize it.
And Michael?
Yeah, so if your users are using your product in unintended ways, that is an opportunity. Obviously, you have to balance that with the cash that you have in the bank and the resources that you have to fully commit to that. But it does tell a story that you can bring to your partners and your investors, and to push that idea forward, and also gives you something to mark off down the line. And there's a lot of examples where these unintended use cases have resulted in kind of $1 billion exits. Just look at YouTube, for example. It started as a dating app. So You have to kind of be adaptable and be able to pivot and keep an open mind. And if you can, it would be better probably to launch it as a separate thing if you have the ability. But really it comes down to being adaptable, because the number one thing for a company's survival and just evolutionary survival is adaptability.
Great responses. So it's clear that being a startup founder, you have to have a lot of passion. You guys definitely put that on display there. For those listening, please use the hashtag #DebateForCovid. Let us know who you think that won that round. And don't forget to donate to our Pledge It campaign. So go to www.pledgeit.org/startupdebate. Show some support for the frontline workers. And now on to the judges' decisions.
And let's introduce our judges. First up, Gabby Rowe, president at Maestro Sports and Entertainment. Next, Halsey Huth, investor at Huddle VC. And lastly, John Dwyer, CEO of Wonder Gaming. Let's kick it over to our head referee, Nick.
All right, that wraps up an amazing debate in the Elite Eight of the esports and gaming. Good fought out debate between Aaron and Michael, and now we are on to the judges for their analysis and picks. So to kick things off, we're going to have Gabby. Can you lead it with your analysis and then followed by your pick?
Sure. I thought both of the founders did a really good job of, first and foremost, as an investor, what you're looking for is someone who is super passionate about what the business is. And obviously both Aaron and Michael showed that passion. You're also looking for something or to invest in someone who's very knowledgeable about their business in general, as well as the segment of the business that they're in. And I thought that both of them did a pretty tremendous job at that. I did find, though, that one of them, in my opinion, more clearly was someone who understood business in general from a much larger perspective. And when you're investing in a business and investing primarily in the people who run those business, you want to make sure that they have a macro view of business in general, and really are going to be looking out for what's in best interest of the money that we are investing. I thought one of the two of them did a better job at that. As far as the specific answers to the 5 different questions, I thought they both did, again, a very passionate job. Although I thought one of them gave much better examples as to reasons why their answers were pertinent to the business. The other point, which I thought was very interesting, that I think that one of them did better than the other, was as an investor, we are not always experts in their business. They have to be able to explain their business in a way that we're going to understand. And I thought that using some real world examples, even some examples outside of esports, really allowed me to find myself nodding my head and agreeing with one of them versus the other. So I'll give you my decision, and then I'll tell you which of those specific things I was talking about. I think that Michael is the winner in my mind. The good points he was making about Halo, the good points he was making about chess being a game that is very, very popular. The good points that he made even about, Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman being members of a team that are different but find a way to work together. Very relevant with Last Dance being something that so many people are watching now. The fact that YouTube used to be a dating app and then came over to the other side and obviously is very successful, I thought was really well done. If I was taking little body blow check marks on this, I had Michael having 6 or 7 really good body blows within the fight, let's call it. And I thought that, Aaron had 4 or 5, but Michael really were coming up with, I believe, things that made me believe that he understands business and was someone I could invest in with more confidence. I think he thought bigger and broader outside of esports. I think that Aaron was more contained within esports. I think Aaron was almost more of expressing tons of gamer knowledge, whereas Michael was expressing much more business knowledge, with also having the gaming experience. So for all of those reasons is why I think that Michael was the winner here.
Thank you for that, Gabby. I appreciate the boxing reference there. So that gives Michael 1 vote. And now we're going to move over to Halsey for his vote and analysis. Can you unmute it real quick and restart? Thank you.
Guys, yep, thanks for that. Gabby, I'm going to agree with you on a few points here and then disagree as well. Yeah, just kind of first off, really impressed with both founders. Both people definitely understand, the topic and the space that we're digging into. I was impressed that, not each founder has the exact same background, but, each were able to come to the table with, experience and actually answer these questions. At the end of it, I'm looking at this from the view of, what would HODL VC be looking at when we're looking at our founders. And really what we're looking for are, knowledgeable founders that are able to look at a space, look at their challenge, and be able to figure out how do we get from, point A to point B to satisfy these users, get this product to market, and actually, start generating some revenue. So with kind of the questions, I wanted to dig into a few of the parts that I thought made kind of the founder that I thought kind of won this round in my mind stand out. So I'm just going to pick through a few of those different questions here. So it's kind of the talent and the diversity side. This is something I think is so core to figuring out if a founder's actually going to make this work out. Yes, it would be fantastic if we all had the ability to, pull together this elite team of our version of Ocean's 11. That would be amazing. And I think if we all had perfect resources, we could do that. But really, when you're looking at this kind of early stage investing, it's about, okay, do you have the ability to find the people that are going to get you from this point A to point B? And who are the actual people that, it may not be the person coming from a unicorn that you're pulling, but you did find the, Aaron, I really appreciated when you said this, albeit I would have said it a different way, the kind of young hustler type that can really move the needle for you. It doesn't always have to be this young hustler, but, it is those individuals that are willing to get into the trenches and really actually help the business, not just take a salary. So I thought kind of your perspective on that, albeit, Michael, I did your analogies with, you need to find it's not just diversity of background, you really need to make the people actually fit in together and work like a team. Yeah, so really interesting debate over, what is the right model for actually running a game or running a product. I feel like everyone here has some very kind of hard-won feelings against, Fortnite and Epic and Riot and League of Legends, and it's fantastic that you guys can see this. Aaron, shots fired. Fortnite is not an esport. That's amazing. Yeah, as someone who's actually personally gone to the Fortnite championship they held in Arthur Ashe Stadium, it's difficult to watch. They know that they're working on that. But I do think that Fortnite's done a ton of amazing stuff that has helped them really stay up there competitive, both on the content side. And then also the game mechanic side. We talked about why is PUBG and this battle royale thing doing well. Have they sold out? To a degree, very much so. But do they have a ton of happy users that are happy with that product? Yes. So I think on the point there, Aaron, as well, you seem to have kind of the grasp of why they actually won that out. And then kind of lastly, I think I may be running out of time. So if the feature requests or, you realize that, what you did build for your community, especially with these tribal groups, one of the fun parts of them being tribal is that they do have really good feedback. And so if you do find those very hungry users that are look, you guys are building this, we see the vision of what you want to do. We know it's an alpha release, but this is how, we think you should be getting out there. That could be great, or that could be a wish of death. It's great that you're able to get feedback from users, but if you decide to appease everyone, you're going to get nowhere. And especially if it's, a critical thing, like in the alpha, you realize, 30% of the people just hate it. That's an issue. You need to go back, very much rethink about what you've done and kind of start from scratch. And if you realize kind of in that initial feedback that there are features and, you do have users that are looking at it a different way, and you need to pull that in, either decide to, full swing, go build that, or, take a deeper look at what you originally built. But back to kind of both Aaron and Michael, you hit this, it only makes sense to go build that if you at that point in time can build it, and if it would actually make sense after this is launched that you guys are actually going to start taking some revenue. So with that, I'll kind of overall, I'm kind of looking at this through the lens of who would we feel kind of most comfortable actually giving a check to. And kind of through this, I really think it would be Aaron. Just kind of last points, very much look at, who would I feel safer with if, something does come up, unexpected issues, is this the founder that's actually going to be able to weather that storm, find the people and use the resources to get there. If they need to make a pivot, they get that pivot and they find the people to do it. So I think if we're doing the boxing match analogy, I think, Aaron would be the one that's, ringing that bell for this today.
Thank you for that analysis, Halsey. So we have a tiebreaker. So Aaron, 1 vote, Michael, 1 vote. And now, John, you are in the hot seat to decide who will go to the final 4. So can you please provide your analysis followed by your pick?
Yeah, I'm gonna side with Gabby on this one. I think for me it was pretty clear that Michael was the type of individual and leader that I, not only out of my personal checkbook, but also from a fund perspective, would feel more comfortable investing in. And I think that's largely built out of the pragmatism and some of the examples he used, which Gabby already referenced. But, the esports industry, and I say this as somebody who has run, global sales and partnerships for the largest publicly traded esports company in the world, esports is a business that still lives inside of its own mythology as to where wins reside, and my favorite line is Jonah Hill in the movie Moneyball, and he says, I think Major League Baseball is an imperfect understanding of where wins reside. And I think esports in and of itself across the board, especially at the team model, if you look at the 20 Overwatch teams and the 12 Call of Duty teams, which are owned respectively across, the world, we all know that they're hemorrhaging cash, right? We all know that they're not exactly pleased with the publishers. We all know that it's been a huge setback with COVID-19, et cetera. And so anybody that's going to operate in this ecosystem and kind of, continue to quarrel with what does and does not constitute esports and make that a central theme to kind of how you look at this industry, I kind of feel like you're looking in the wrong space. You got an imperfect understanding where wins come from. We're in the business right now of demonstrating to the world that this is a safe place for money. And you want to have an operator to, again, Gabby, to quote you, is, to somebody that has more of a macro view of the marketplace. And there are a ton of people out there right now that really get esports and they understand gamers. And I'll tell you, as we all know, gamers are the most discerning audience maybe on the planet. And when they spot inauthenticity, they call it out. And it's not like they're watching it on TSN, they're watching it on Twitch, YouTube, Caffeine, etc., on platforms where they're able to comment and they're able to just cast aspersions on anything they want, and they can bomb a brand fast. Which has become such a very difficult reality for a lot of the big teams and a lot of different brands trying to get non-endemic partners to participate, because it's such a democratized opportunity for people to cast aspersions. And so that's why, in my opinion, I really liked Michael's approach, because I found that he just kind of demonstrated more of a reasonable approach to handling some of the inadequacies that this marketplace is going to lay at all of our feet. And I think the other thing too is when you have people with that style of approach, and I do apologize, I know I'm not going strictly by the questions, but I'm a shoot from the hip kind of fella. When you have people with that style of approach, when things go wrong, they're amenable to new change. They're amenable to change in valuation, change in approach. Hey, look, we got to lay off some staff. Like all of these pragmatic items that are such a central theme. I don't care if you're manufacturing car parts, textiles, or you run an esports business. That is such a central theme in every company. And I think more of that style of rigor that entrepreneurs and operators in this space bring to bear and how they run their business day to day is going to help the esports business mature a lot quicker. And it's going to help guys like myself and all the other folks that are investing in this space really make draw bigger check sizes and sleep a little bit better at night. Because I know, in spite of the fact that esports has spiked during this COVID crisis, which is tragic, but at the same time terrific for the industry, it's going to be interesting to see how that manifests itself in the new money that's going to come to the space, how guys are going to be making decisions on how to grow their business. And so for all of that, I just got a good spidey sense about Michael versus the other jet.
Thank you for that analysis, John, and congratulations to Michael. You just got a ticket to the Final Four. Great job by Aaron for his 12-out debate. If you